Hello everybody and welcome to today's dentistry industry webinar for our partners students. My name is Sandra Hobson-Tate and I'm the careers consultant for dentistry here at Newcastle University. And today I'm joined by Dr. Kate Lundy and Dr. Graham Tinkler. So in the first half of this webinar today, each guest will be going through a short presentation just to tell you a little bit more about who they are and what they do and how their degree helped prepare them for their career. We then have about half an hour for Q&As. So whilst you're listening to these presentations, please would you put any questions that you have in the chat box. So we're now going to hand over to Kate, who is an associate dentist with My Dentist. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Sandra. So yeah, like Sandra said, I am an associate dentist. So basically your standard day-to-day general dentist, and I work in Gateshead. I graduated from Belfast in 2019, so I haven't been working that long. Had about 6 months out of graduation before the COVID pandemic hit. So I've sort of been working and navigating through that, which has been fun and interesting, to sort of say the least. Basically, I think what I wanted to sort of get across was that there's so many interesting ways you can go through your dental career. You don't have to stick with sort of what I'm doing, which is sort of what most people think of when they hear dentistry. There's lots and lots of little niche aspects of dentistry you can go into, and that's something that you'll pick up sort of as you go through uni and through your career as well. But I just sort of wanted to give you a rundown of what it was that I enjoy about my job. So the main thing that drew me to dentistry was that I got to work with people day in, day out. Lots of people coming and going. I knew I didn't want a desk job. I wanted lots of interaction, and the fact that sort of you can help people and it's a bit of a caring profession as well is really, really was important to me. Dentistry is great because there's plenty of progression and there's plenty of movement and development in whatever way you want to go, and you know, that's something that just keeps everything interesting and fun and sort of keeps you working towards something, which is great. My day-to-day is very, very varied. I'm working in a mixed NHS and private practice, so I would say I do about 75% NHS work and 25% private. I work 5 days a week. It totals to 41 and a half hours, which is an awful lot of hours a week. You know, but that can be fairly standard for an NHS dentist. What is great about dentistry in that you're sort of self-employed is you have a wee bit of control when it comes to your days. You can work full-time, you can work part-time, you can work shorter days, longer days, whatever it is you want to do, and that's, you know, sort of great, and it is up to you. And you can fill your days with whatever sort of treatments that you want. Private is good in a sense in that you get a little bit more control over it, whereas with NHS it's just a bit of, you know, you get the checkups in, you get the fill-ins in, and you do what you can for the patient. So something that I think a lot of people, or I would say to a lot of people that are thinking about studying dentistry, is that you have to have a desire to want to help people and to care for people. I think if you don't have that, getting into this job can be a bit tricky, because at the end of the day, I think being a healthcare professional is a great thing, and it's a great job to try and choose. So having that sort of in your corner will definitely help you as you progress through your career, and it'll help you sort of maybe succeed a little bit more than someone who's motivated by something different. That's not to say that dentistry doesn't have its challenges. There's a lot of negative headlines when it comes to dentistry, particularly NHS dentistry, especially through the pandemic. You know, a lot of people have talked about NHS waiting lists and having to do their own treatment at home and things like that, and it's not always the case, and we sort of get a bit of a bad rap, you know, but I personally think that the good outweighs the bad, especially when it comes to dentistry and NHS dentistry. So generally working with people is grand, but they can be the hardest sort of part of the job. They have lots of questions, and sometimes you don't know the answer. A lot of the time they complain about how much it costs, and you have to try and defend your pricing system, which is set by the NHS a lot of the time. So that's a skill in itself, and it's something that's hard to develop during uni whenever treatment's free, but it quickly becomes a skill that you have to sort of push through and learn very, very quickly. Generally with dentistry, what I like about it is that I have the ability to go into any aspect that I want to go into, and that can involve sort of specializing. So that would be like being an orthodontist who puts braces on and things like that. But you don't have to fully specialize in that one particular aspect of dentistry. You can sort of stay quite general, but have something that interests you that you do a little bit more in, but you still do a lot of everything else. So that's always a great option. And there's even sort of business aspects or legal aspects or educational aspects you can go into that just help you develop further and go further. And I think that's something to kind of have an idea on while you're going through your course. But don't be fixated on a single goal, because things change and your plans change, and what you actually enjoy doing might be different when you're outside of your studies to when you're actually studying. I know that happened for me, so definitely just keep sort of your mind open. But yeah, that was kind of my quick sort of rundown of what I enjoy and what I like. So I'm happy to pass on to Graham now for him to talk.
Great, thanks so much, Kate. Really, really interesting. Thank you. I'm sure we've got lots of questions for you later. So now over to Graham, who is director and co-founder at Clear Braces Direct. Thanks, Graham.
Hello, thanks Sandra, thanks Kate. Now I'm a lot older than Kate, so I graduated in 2000. So I'm certainly a lot older than most of you. But and a bit like Kate, I could have given a presentation and bored you to death showing photos of teeth, but instead I thought we'd just talk a little bit about my background pre-university, my time at Newcastle University, and then a little bit about post-university. So I'm led to believe, you're all from various different backgrounds. So my upbringing was on a farm. I grew up on a farm in Durham, not very far from Newcastle. And I didn't want to be a dentist. I wanted to be a farmer, but I wasn't allowed to be a farmer. I was one of 3 boys, and my dad said no. The farm wasn't big enough to support two families. So then I thought, right, what do I do next? Then I wanted something that was practical. I wanted to work something where I was working with my hands, and I'm showing my age again now, but I wasn't a big fan of computers or cameras. I was a bit of a Luddite, a bit of a technophobe, and I thought, well, dentistry is perfect, because I couldn't bear the thought of being sat in front of a computer. So I thought dentistry will be perfect because I'm working with my hands. Now, of course, everything we do is on computer. We design crowns on computer, we design smiles on computer. So in fact, 2 days a week of my time now is spent purely just treatment planning. So I actually only do 3 days clinical. So, and that's what's, so there's been some big changes in 20 years. So from me graduating to now, huge changes. So I also wasn't the most academic. I mean, you guys the grades you have to get now are a lot higher than when I did it. I had to get a B and 2 C's, which is exactly what I got. So I didn't over stretch myself. I just managed to get exactly what I needed, a B and 2 C's. But also, so you'll be going to, hopefully you guys will get the grades you need. And if you're going to Newcastle, so you'll be looking forward to going there. So my advice when you're at Newcastle would be just to throw yourself into everything. I used to play a lot of sport, probably too much sport. I played a lot of rugby, and I used to play for Durham County as well. So we were doing a lot of training. So yeah, on hindsight, I probably used to play too much rugby, and as a result, I actually failed my first year at Newcastle, which I wouldn't recommend, because I assumed that if you failed a year, you just got to redo it. That wasn't actually the case. So I had to beg to be allowed to redo that first year. So then I, wised up a little bit and realised that the lectures were there for a reason. You do actually have to attend the lectures. And it's not one of those courses, I had friends that were on a course that their courses were sort of 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week. Dentistry is pretty full on. So even when you're there at university, it's, the hours are a lot more hours than your average course. So you are committing yourself to, 5 years, and, there's a lot of study in there. So, but I think if you use your time wisely. So, I mean, I played rugby. I also had a job outside. I used to work in a bar as well as a way of earning a bit of extra money. So you do have the time to do these things on the side. You've just got to structure your time well. But the course itself was enjoyable. I enjoyed every aspect of it, the anatomy, and I do remember thinking from a practical point of view, and I don't know if it was like this when Kate was there, but it was third year before you actually got to do any. So first year and second year was purely academic. In fact, we shared lectures with the medics. So it wasn't until third year that we had patients and we started learning about how to work on teeth. But I remember wanting to do that right from the very off. And again, this might have changed, but I remember even throughout the course, throughout the 5-year course or 6-year course in my case, the practical bit only made up 5% of the end of year exams, which for a job that requires a good set of hands, as well as being able to communicate well, it never sat well with me. That I always thought it should be more weighted in terms of from a practical point of view. But yeah, so I enjoyed my time at Newcastle. It's one of the, I loved everything about Newcastle, and I was sad to actually leave. It's a fun town. Every night feels like a weekend sometimes when you go out to Newcastle, and everyone in Newcastle is friendly. In fact, I was just saying to Sandra earlier, when I come back up to Newcastle, I have to sort of pinch myself to begin with. I think, why is everyone being so nice? That's what happens if you're in London for too long. So I'm sure if you end up going there and you get the grades, you'll have a fantastic time. You'll enjoy the course. It's a fantastic university, and it's saying you'll have time to do things other than dentistry. Sometimes you have to take the blinkers off a little bit and just enjoy what's going on around it. So post university, eventually I qualified in 2000. So I started in 94, qualified in 2000, and normally most people, if they qualified at Newcastle, would work in and around Newcastle. So you do your training in and around Newcastle. But a lot of the friends that I'd made at Newcastle, they were on 3 or 4 year courses. They'd already left. They'd moved down to London, and I was hearing all these stories about how much fun they were getting up to, and now worried that I was missing out on all the fun. So I applied for a training year to do my, I think it's called DFT, is it now, or it was called VT when I was doing it. So I applied to do that in London. I actually thought I'd probably work in London for a couple of years and then move back up north. And 22 years later, still in London. So you put down roots. So my first year was an NHS practice, a mixed practice. Second year was a mixed practice. And then I talked a colleague of mine that was also at Newcastle with me. He'd worked in Middlesbrough, and I talked him into moving down to London. And between us, we set up a practice near Wimbledon. So it was a mixed practice, and that was going well. And then we set up a squat in central London. So a squat is if there isn't an existing practice, you just buy an empty unit and kit it out, and then you have to gradually build up the business. So we had those two practices. Then children came along, and because when it's your own practice, sometimes you feel you need to be there first, especially when it's a new practice. You felt you needed to be there first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening, and the danger was that the children would be in bed when I left, and they'd still be in bed when I got back, and so you wouldn't see them. So I ended up selling both those practices. It was just the right time for me. And then for the last 8 years, I've been working as an associate. But to reiterate what Kate said, dentistry's has lots of there's pros and cons. But one pro is that you can dictate the hours that you work sometimes, especially as a principal, I guess. And it's a good standard of living if you're prepared to work hard. It's not quite as easy as some people might make out. And you're dealing with the general public. That's what I miss about being on the farm in my tractor. I only had myself just sit there, listen to the radio, not having to deal with the general public. So, but you develop those skills as you go along. So it's flexible, kind of flexible hours, and particularly, I know lots of fellow dentists, girls that I qualified with. When I was there, it was about 50-50 girls, male to female. I don't know what it is now, but a lot of the girls I qualified with maybe down tools for a few years when they had children, then able to pick up the tools again. So, again, there's not many jobs where you can do that quite so easily. But now after 8 years as working as an associate, the children a bit more grown up now, I decided I wanted to be my own boss again. So I think it was too much thinking time during lockdown. I started thinking I didn't want to work for this corporate that I was working for anymore. And I started putting the feelers out for another practice. And I found, again, it was an empty practice. It was actually a practice that went into administration. So it was empty. There wasn't a business, but the chairs were there. And so we took that over. That's Cannon Street Dental Centre, where we are now. And we've been here a year since March. So I'm enjoying being my own boss again. And we'll see where that takes us. So going forward, I know it's a little way off, 5 years from now, but you never know. When you're qualifying, you might be looking for somewhere in London. And I always struggled when I first moved to London, it was hard to find a job in central London. You usually had to start outside of London and work in. So if nothing else, I might be a good contact for you guys when you qualify 5 years from now. Hopefully it's 5 years from now, not 6 years from now, like in my case.
That's great, Graham. Thank you so much. Well, we have got lots of messages come through in the chat box. So this is from Farah to Dr. Lundy. Kate, what differences have you noticed from working in the Northeast compared to working with patients in Ireland?
Do you know what? We were just chatting about this, how people from Northern Ireland and people from the Northeast are very similar. So you actually get the same sort of chat and banter from patients, which is great. In terms of sort of differences, I would say that in Belfast there was a lot more disease, a lot more decay than there would be that I'm seeing in the Northeast. So there was a lot more of your bog standard dentistry, which is just fill-ins and root canals and taking out teeth. At the minute I'm seeing people who want to save their teeth a little bit more, so you're trying to work that way rather than just taking out teeth because the patients couldn't be bothered. I'd say that's the main sort of difference that I'm seeing.
Right.
Yeah,
that's great. And again from Farah, another one for Graham. What inspired you to take on special cases of Invisalign that other practices denied, and how do you think that this has helped your skills as a dentist?
So I ended up being my first patient with Invisalign. So I actually had braces as a child, had the old fixed braces, and was given a retainer, was told to wear it for a year, which I did. And then as soon as I stopped, the teeth just gradually moved. So when I qualified from Newcastle, my teeth were all over the place. Again, I was thinking, oh, I need to sort my teeth out, but I couldn't face wearing the train tracks again. So I actually got myself on the Invisalign course just for that reason, just from a selfish point of view, because I wanted it. And that was in 2006. So there wasn't actually many dentists doing Invisalign then, but because I was wearing it myself, it was a talking point with patients. So that's how I got into it. And then I realized actually it was, if anything, it was the nice side of dentistry, you know. It was a bit more rewarding than pulling teeth and doing root fillings. And every time the patients saw you, they were a bit happier because they saw the improvement. So it got to the point. I mean, I was a jack of all trades at one point. You know, I do the crowns, I do the Invisalign, I do the implants and the root fillings. But one of the things you'll find as a dentist is, as time goes along, you find an area which you enjoy, and you have to keep finding that next thing just to keeps things fresh, just keeps changing things, because otherwise it can get a little bit monotonous. So if you can find something to specialize in, whether it's implants, whether it's, you know, so everyone has to start off as a general dentist until you find your calling, if you like. And there's lots of different specialities out there. So I fell into, I always liked orthodontics, but not enough to want to do fixed braces. And obviously Invisalign wasn't taught when I was at university. It wasn't a thing. These clear aligners has come about more recently than that. But so that's how I fell into it, and it's quite a steep learning curve. So, you know, you're quite selective with your cases to begin with, and then as you go along, you realise, well, if it can do this, it can do that, and then you're in a position to take on the more challenging cases. Hopefully that answers your question.
That's super great. Thank you. So, Kate, one question's come in from Alaya. So, what's the one thing that you would have done differently during your degree?
Oh wow. So
that's an interesting one.
That is an interesting. So, like Graham, I actually had to repeat a year. I did 6 instead of 5 years. I had to repeat my 3rd year because I failed an exam. And similar enough, I had to go back and beg them to take me back in. Thankfully, they did. I think if I was going to do anything differently, I would have used like my tutors and the staff a little bit more, because they always said they were there for support, and I never really went down that route. And I think just utilising everything that you can and using everyone that you can it can't hurt. And I do that now more that I'm working rather than I did when I was at uni. So it's all, you kind of learn some of these things a bit later on, but definitely use anyone you can to get.
I think for this professional, networks and contacts important for our students.
I think so. I think you don't realise how important networking is until you start working, and actually having a few contacts, people that you can go to with questions, or, you know, if you are looking for a job, that's a good thing to start building up while you're doing your degree, definitely.
Brilliant, good advice. Thanks.
I think that's really good advice. I was just saying, I wasn't very good at asking for help when I was at Newcastle University, and you're surrounded by all those people, and all they really want is for you to. They love you asking for, you know, your advice. What would you do in this situation? You know, I think I was just destined to learn everything the hard way, but and you do get there eventually, but you'll get there a lot quicker if you're willing to ask for help. So I think Kate's advice there is really good.
Fabulous, yeah, fab. So a question for you now, Graham. What does being a dentist give you that no other profession could?
What does it give you? Well, I suppose, like say, I touched on it before, but a bit of flexibility, I guess, because you're self-employed. Mm-hmm. So obviously you don't earn if you're not working. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So a lot of jobs, obviously, you get paid if you're on holiday or not. So if me and Kate take a holiday, it's a double whammy, really, because you're paid for the holiday and you're not getting paid when you're on the holiday. So yeah, but that flexibility, I don't know if other jobs are quite as flexible as that. But like I say, there's opportunity to, if you want to work as part of a group, you can as an associate, but there's the option there of if you want to be your own boss as well. So it definitely offers that, and I'm not sure how many other professions offer that role.
Yeah, great. Kate, now one for you. What was the biggest challenge that you faced whilst you were practicing during the COVID restrictions?
During COVID, it was actually not too bad because I was basically working part-time, which was great. So I'd only just graduated and had a long summer, and then worked for 6 months, and then was working part-time. So I kind of got a feel for part-time life, and now that I'm back to full-time, it's not the same. But I think the challenge was getting patients to understand it. Most of the challenges in dentistry come down to the fact that you work with the general public, and that there are people that will constantly question and constantly sort of fight you. And patients didn't understand what the definition of an emergency in terms of dentistry was. To them, a lost filling is an emergency. To us, that's not really. Someone with an abscess or a big swelling or a massive toothache, that's much more of an emergency situation, and we had to prioritize those patients over other ones. So I think it was just the public perception of what was going on, what we were able to do, and how we were able to do it. There was a lot of phone conversations where the receptionist had told them something, the nurse had told them the same thing, and then I had to go down and tell them the exact same thing over the phone, to try and prove that we weren't lying and we weren't trying to fob the patients off.
There must be some real challenging times that you've had recently. Just another one's popped up here for Graham now. What does it take to be successful within a career such as dentistry?
Persistence, hard work, and keep adapting to changes, keep reinventing yourself. To have a sort of longevity, you need to it's not the cleverest or the smartest, it's just who's most willing to adapt, really. So open yourself up to change. Like I say, I wasn't particularly au fait with computers, so then you often you're having to take yourself out your comfort zone just to be able to move with the times a little bit.
And I suppose particularly with self-employment, I guess it's about being adaptable and spotting opportunities as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and also the sad thing is they don't teach the business side of dentistry at university. I don't know if that's maybe changed since, but they don't teach the financial aspects of running a business. They'll teach the clinical side of it, but then so you go in very wet behind the ears when you graduate, when it comes to so again it ends up being a very steep learning curve when it doesn't need to be. So I'm hoping dental school is very different now than it was 20 years ago when I qualified, but I don't know, I might have to come and revisit it.
Well, you'd be really welcome to join us up north, definitely. Part of the Careers Service does offer startup support. So we've got a good track record in helping young businesses set up and grow, but it's not part of the BDS course, as in to give those business skills. I've got another question again, Graham. How easy is it to switch off at the end of the day?
I used to find it a lot easier as an associate than as a practice owner. As an associate, what I loved about it, 5 o'clock or whenever you finish your down tools and that, I wouldn't give it another thought. When you practice owner, I'm lying there in bed thinking, okay, we need to do this and we need to do that, and managing staff as well takes up a lot of your time. So I'd say it's pros and cons, but like in answer to the question, it's a lot harder to switch off, I think, when you're running your own business. But I quite like those. I quite enjoy those challenges. I enjoyed my 8 years as being an associate, and but then I was ready for that change.
Again, question. Sorry,
I was going to say it really helps if you have a good partner. Whenever I've owned a practice, I've always gone into it with a partner, because then you can share the, problem shared is a problem halved. So yeah, it's something that you find a like-minded person, and someone that you feel you can trust, and you can do that together. That sort of makes it a lot easier.
I've got a question here I don't know too much about, so I'm going to ask the experts, which is what it's all about. But so what sort of working environment is it? And the other part of the question is, why is it known to have high suicide rates?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is everyone's favorite fact whenever they hear that you're a dentist, is they're like, oh, the high suicide rate. I'm like, that's a great thing to say to a dentist. Like, thanks. But I think it is. I think it can be a very stressful job. And there can be a lot, and there's a lot of balls in the air when you're working. As an associate, you don't have that added pressure of paying staff and managing. But I do know that there's a lot of people can struggle to switch off at the end of the day. And I think that's a big part of it, just knowing when to leave work at work. Knowing, especially with dentistry, like, yes, it can be a highly pressurized job, but nothing you're going to do is going to kill someone or ruin someone's life. I think, you kind of need to remember that there's a bit of perspective here as well. But yeah, just also, I think just having stuff outside of work that you can go and you can, whether that's sports, music, whatever it is, and just have something else to keep your mind on it, and that'll help.
Yeah, really important to switch off and take care, isn't it?
Yeah, because it could become all consuming, if you didn't have interests outside of dentistry. And like I say, you're dealing with the general public, but you're often dealing with the general public who are in pain and don't always want to have to spend money to. So there's 3 reasons why they're not entirely happy to see you. They'll see you, and sometimes the first thing a patient will say when you meet them for the first time is, by the way, I hate dentists. That's your starting point. Can you think of any other meeting that you wouldn't go and see your bank manager and say, by the way, I hate bank managers? That would, and that's where you're starting from. So you have to then build from there sometimes. So so it's not the easiest starting point, but I think Kate's right. I think it's having interests and hobbies outside of work, and that goes back to university as well. When you're at university, develop those hobbies and nurture those hobbies when you're at university, because they'll see you through. They'll carry you through your career as well.
That's good advice as well. So Samar is asking for Kate, what's the most rewarding part of your job?
I think it's definitely when you have, there's a few things that I really enjoy, and one thing is working with very nervous patients. So like Graham said, a lot of the time someone comes in and is like, they're standing in the doorway and it's like, I'm really nervous, and they haven't even introduced themselves, they don't even know who you are, and you're like, right, let's just get you in and let's get going. And then when you get them through a few appointments, and then they become a bit more comfortable, and they say, oh, I'm not as nervous anymore. That's something that's really, really rewarding as well. And I know that in terms of what Graham was saying, with patients coming in for Invisalign and they're a little bit happier, a little bit smilier because they can see things working, that's a big sort of push through, I think, all the negativity when it comes to our job, and you get the sort of not so nice patients or the trickier patients. You have to try and remember to let the good outweigh the bad. But like, you even get some NHS patients who you make them a denture that looks okay, fits okay, not perfect, but they're absolutely buzzing, because they can eat and they can smile, and that is really, really worthwhile. That still is something that makes you smile at the end of the day.
Oh, that's lovely. Great. So for both of you now, Aisha is asking, what other professionals do you work with on a daily basis?
I mean, most practices there'll be a manager, there'll be other dentists. There's usually a hygienist, and but obviously it's important to have a good team around you in terms of nurses as well, because I'm sure Kate would agree. You know, you're only, the dentist is only as good as the team around them. But then, like I say, we're fortunate we have specialists pop in, you know, so there'll be an implantologist come in 1 or 2 days a month. There's an endodontist, and so you know there's a bit of a turnstile that you know each day's a little bit different, and you can learn from, you know, you learn a lot from other dentists, and even if you've been doing the same thing for a long time, there's always something you can learn from others. There's a new way of doing things. But yeah, to have a good team around you makes the day go a lot quicker, for sure.
That's good. Another one for Graham. What is the hardest part of your day-to-day role?
I'd say managing staff, probably.
Right.
Yeah. You know, because it gets to a point where the actual dentistry bit is your bread and butter. It's everything else that's going on around it, really. And as Kate mentioned earlier, you're spinning a few different plates, really. You're wearing several different hats. So that's the trickiest bit.
So, Kate, Nikhil's asking, what is a surprising aspect about being a dentist which you wouldn't have expected whilst you were a student?
I think I think the biggest thing that shocked me was people really rely on your word. You know, there's a lot of patients say, you just do what you feel's best, or I trust you. And when you're 4, 5, 6 months graduated, you're kind of like, I don't think you should. You know, so I think that's the thing, is that your patients trust you, and they put a lot of them in your hands, you know, which can be a bit scary, and is a big responsibility, but it can also work out really, really well. But that's something you don't really think about, because when you're studying, when you're doing your degree, everything you do is checked and, you know, overseen by a dentist, and they sign off on everything. So you're sort of making the clinical decisions yourself after you graduate, and patients definitely think that you know absolutely everything about teeth. So that was the biggest shock.
You're the expert, aren't you? Thank you. Graham, how have you found managing work-life balance?
Well, I don't think you ever get it right, to be honest, in probably any job. I think you can work for 40 years and still not get the work-life balance thing right. But I think maybe COVID helped a little bit in that respect, insofar as I sort of changed the way I work. So, you know, it was interesting listening to Kate mention the dynamics there as well. But again, it was about adapting. So we then, rather than see the patient every 4 weeks to check on the progress, we now use an app, and the patient scans their teeth from home every week, and that's how we monitor their progress. So as a result, the patient's not doesn't take up as much chair time, and it means, you know, 2 days a week I'm actually monitoring, you know, albeit from my computer from home, or doing treatment planning. So I can actually, and you know, as a dentist, I never ever thought I'd be able to say I work from home 2 days a week. You know, if you told someone you work from home as a dentist, of course you do, you know. But so that's helped. You know, just those 2 days a week, you know, it means you do have a bit more time. You can drop the kids off at school and be at your computer for the same time it would have been if you'd gone into the practice. So I think that has helped with the work-life balance thing. But also, you know, I would want to reiterate as well that if you were just wanting to go into dentistry just for financial gain, then it's probably not that would be the wrong reason to go into dentistry. You know, it's there was definitely a golden period in dentistry where where that might have been the case, but it's hard yards these days. There's a lot of competition. It's long hours, so the main reason for doing it would be to want to, help others. But yeah, there's not a guaranteed sort of financial gain. It doesn't, not without the hard work to back it up.
Great. Kate, one's coming now. How many hours would you say that you had to study per week during your dentistry course?
I don't know. So when I was studying, we got 2 or 3 half days, and in those sort of half days where you had an afternoon or a morning off, and you were meant to do your own studying. So you were meant to take sort of 3 to 4 hours, I guess, for a half day. So you were given 12 hours to study. That was during the week. I don't think anyone actually studies for those 12 hours. That was when you went shopping, or I don't know, maybe you had a hobby, maybe you played your sport during that time, whatever it was. But I don't think anyone spent that time studying. You probably were having a lie-in from the night before. I don't know, I guess I always sort of thought if I did a full day at uni, if I could do 2 hours in an evening of some form of study, and that was doing pretty well, and then a little bit on the weekends. But that wasn't even every weekend, like that was in the lead up to exams. It sort of depends on the time of the year, I think. If you're coming up to your exams, obviously you're spending as much of your free time as you can, just trying to get everything in. I probably could have done more, if I'm being honest. But I think making sure that you are sort of consistently doing a little bit every week would be beneficial. But you hear that all the time, all the way through school, all the way through uni, whether you do or not, is up to you. And everyone's different. Some people can cram and that's how they study. Some people like to be organised and do the work right from week one, just so that they stay on top of it. And it's just sort of finding what works for you, I think. But I wouldn't be an advocate for spending every single waking minute studying. Definitely go out and enjoy yourself, especially in like September, October. What have you really learned?
I would argue if you, academically, if you have it in you to get the A levels that are required to get on the course, you'll find the academic side of the course, quite straightforward. You have plenty of time to be able to, it's not as challenging, I don't think, as the A levels that you're required to actually get on the course. And you probably have more free time than you would when you're actually at school studying A levels. So it's just a case of, I say, using your time well.
Yeah, managing the time's really important.
You won't be saying to your desk, you'll have plenty of time to do everything that you want to do.
That's good to hear. Great. So question for both of you, how do you deal with stress in the workplace? Is that an issue for you? Graham's smiling.
Yeah, I think I might say, if you have a good team around you, well drilled team, they can mitigate a lot of the stress before it actually. So it's trying to eliminate stress before it actually happens. You can put a lot of stress on yourself unnecessarily, financially, often from things outside of dentistry. Because dentistry, there's peaks and troughs in terms of, the busy times of year, quieter times of year. You can get black swan events like COVID and that sort of thing, where you can't work and you could be ill and you can't work. And so you have to not be too hand to mouth. You have to not be too month to month. Otherwise that then can create stress unnecessarily. So I think, it's just managing that. I mean, financial stress is people's biggest stress, I suspect. So it's trying not to put yourself in that position, really.
Mhm. Kate, you mentioned before about, about self-care and looking after yourself. Any other tips for handling stress in this career?
I think it's what's helped me is actually having a lot of friends, both that are dentists and aren't dentists. So you have friends that you can talk to about cases that have been tricky, or
Yeah.
you just need to rant to someone who'll understand it. Which, if you have a friend or a partner who doesn't do dentistry, they're not going to. But you also need people outside of dentistry that can just take your mind off things. So I think having a little bit of both is a great way of dealing with potential stresses.
Good. Right, we're coming nearly to the end, so I've got a few more questions. A really good one's coming from Sophia for both of you. What skill did you need that you didn't think you would?
I think it all comes down to sort of your people management. Is a skill that you don't really have a lot of when you're 18. And then I don't know if you ever really get to the peak of that skill. I think it's something that you continue to grow and develop, and it's knowing how to talk to everyone. So whether that's a child or whether that's an older person, someone who's extremely nervous or has a disability, I think it's adapting actually your communication skills per patient. It can be tricky when you see in 20-30 patients a day. That's a lot of difference. And how you talk to a patient can be the difference between not having something become very stressful or be a stressful situation and something sort of blowing up in your face just from your management. I think that is something that you're always learning, and not something you necessarily have a lot of experience with when you're starting out.
Yeah. Graham, what's your point?
Yeah, so things like empathy and compassion you can't teach that. So there's skills that you sort of develop by the wayside, or you realize that actually if I don't develop these set of side skills at the same time as the practical bit and all the other bits, then that you need the full package really. So you don't go into dentistry thinking, oh, I'll do it because I'm really compassionate, this, that, and the other, but you do it because you're thinking often from the practical point of view, I think I could see myself in that job. But yeah, there's a lot more sides to it than you would initially. Well, from my point of view, that's how I was having to rack my brains really to think of something, but yeah, it's not the first thing that jumps out at you, when you think I'll sign up to that, but then you realize as time goes along, you have the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes. And actually, you know what? The biggest thing is the ability to listen. As dentists, we tend to, that's why they say you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, you're supposed to listen more than, but as dentists, especially if you're on a tight time frame, you think, right, I've got 15 minutes to tell this patient everything that I think they need to know. Sometimes just to sit back and listen, you'll learn a lot more, and the patient will actually tell you what they want, what the problem is. And I think that's half the battle. So that's something that I've learned over time.
That's great. Now we're coming to the end of our partner session, so I've just got one final question for you both. It's the same question, so I'm going to go for Kate first. Considering your time at university and your own career, what one bit of advice would you like to share with our partner students?
I think something that I've learned mainly from failing a year and having to repeat is that everything does work out. When you have a patient that is giving you a bit of grief or something hasn't gone according to plan, it very, very rarely ends up being a problem long term. So don't let something going wrong stress you out too much or get you down too much, because it generally works itself out.
Oh, that's a fab piece of advice. And Graham, over to you. Considering your time at university and your own career path, what one bit of advice would you give to our partner students? I'm
just glad to hear that Kate failed a year. I thought I was the only person that ever failed a year. So that makes me feel a lot better. So, yeah, all the best.
There's loads of us that have. Everyone keeps it a secret, I think.
Well, yeah, well, there you go. You know, it just shows that, you know, persistence gets you a long way. And if you want something badly enough, you'll keep at it. And you know, these students here that we're talking to now wouldn't be in the position they're in now. They wouldn't be applying to dental school and hopefully getting in there in September unless they had persistence to even get them to this point. So I think if they can stick with that, that'll get you a long way.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. So thank you for your time, Graham and Kate, and also thank you to all of our partners students as well. We really hope that you've enjoyed today's session. We hope that you've learned something from it and taken something away, and enjoy your time at Partners this week in Newcastle.